Welcome to Bake to the Future. We bring you a fresh take on the latest trends and issues impacting the baking sector through exclusive insights and conversations. Brought to you by the American Bakers Association.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Haley Blumenreich.
And I'm Katie Jewell.
And today we are taking you on a visit to the plant floor of a baking manufacturing facility to explore sanitary design.
And if you're thinking what I'm thinking, what in the world is sanitary design, then you're in the right place. And we have the perfect guest for it with us today. His name is Karl Thorson. He's the Global Food Safety and Sanitation Manager at General Mills to help us understand the importance of designing a baking facility with sanitation front of mind.
And a little bit about Karl. He has spent 25 years with Pillsbury/General Mills in both plant and corporate roles in quality, operations, and sanitation. He has worked with multiple product platforms, including cereal, pizza, yum, yogurt, dough products, snacks, and other dry, refrigerated, and frozen products. His areas of focus include allergen and pathogen control, sanitary design, and sanitation training/education. He has been recognized as the Baking and Snack Magazine's 2016 Operations Executive of the Year and 2016 Sanitarian of the Year by the International Association of Food Protection. Welcome, Karl.
Hi, nice to talk to you guys. I'm excited to be here.
That was quite the intro. And we have a lot of conversation about sanitary design and sanitation and the importance of that and everything that our members need to be thinking of when they're setting up a bakery line. But we have a few non-sanitation related questions. First, I'll start it off. What is your favorite baked good?
What is my favorite baked good? Oh, I would have to say a filled Bismarck.
Oh, wait, okay, explain.
So like the cherry, like a cherry filling or some type of filling inside of a Bismarck is my favorite.
All right, can you back up just a little bit because I still don't. I work for the baking industry, and I guess I just don't know what a Bismarck is.
So like a enclosed donut with a filling inside of it.
Okay, like a jelly-filled donut sort of thing.
Yes, there we go.
Is that a regional word that's used?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I'm going to have to Google this thing. Okay. A filled Bismarck. Got it. All right. Awesome. I'm going to go Google that now.
Delicious. You'll have to try one.
Yeah, that sounds delicious. I definitely want to try one of those. And I don't know if you have worked with any Bismarcks in the past in your career, but maybe you could walk us through. We had a little bit of background in the intro about you, but maybe you could walk us through what brought you to where you are today. And is this where you thought you would end up being, the expert on sanitation in the food industry?
No, I absolutely did not grow up thinking that I was going to end up in this position. I mean, it wasn't even until college that I realized there was a food science degree. So I grew up here in Minnesota. My family still has a farm up in central Minnesota. And worked there, and then went to college at the University of Minnesota, and stumbled upon the food science degree. I started out pre-vet, and happened to have to take a principles of nutrition class, and then found out about this whole food science thing. And luckily, General Mills and Pillsbury were based in Minneapolis here. I started out working part-time for General Mills, and then after college, got a full-time job with Pillsbury. We had a facility down in Atlanta, and got involved in quality there after getting my food science degree, and worked there in quality and sanitation, and then moved back to Minneapolis. Here we have a bakery here that I worked at, and then Pillsbury got bought by General Mills. So I've been with the combination of companies my entire career then.
And so what sort of person, like you probably train a lot of folks who work in sanitation and all of that. What sort of traits do people need to have to work as a food sanitation person?
Right. So in, a leadership role, we definitely, it's a broad range of skills that we're looking for, because people don't think about the interactions you've got to have cross-functionally, right? You think about sometimes you get involved in designing the system up front, right? We may have new equipment, new systems that are installed in our facilities, so we want to have somebody with some expertise, some experience with thinking about, hey, how do we want to design the facility? How do we want to design that equipment? So those characteristics, as well as project management, they've got to do a lot of work, on a regular basis, cleaning the systems. But also there might be, plant downtime where they're going to do extensive cleaning. Maybe they've got to clean silos, or there's ductwork cleaning or some special event type cleaning that they've got to do. Obviously, leadership of people. They're going to be leading groups of people and influencing other groups. Sometimes sanitation, they might have a small group that they lead directly, but then they're definitely influencing, the manufacturing operations team, as well as other teams that might be accomplishing tasks in the area of sanitation. Obviously, great organizational skills, understanding of chemistry and allergens and microbiology. And there's just a lot of different things that you need to pull together to be really successful in managing food risk in a food plant, and making sure that we don't get ourselves into trouble, and provide safe, quality food to our consumers.
And maybe we could back up just a little bit and have you explain what sanitary design is and why it's so important.
Yes, definitely. So I like to talk about how this relates to something that people better understand, which is probably your own kitchen, right? So if you get the opportunity to, maybe at some point you've built a new home and you've obviously had to help with deciding how that kitchen's going to be designed, or you've remodeled and you're doing a kitchen work. So it's simple concepts that you'd use at home, and the same thing applies as we scale up and think about a manufacturing facility. It's things like, hey, what kind of materials of construction do I want to use? For example, I'm probably not going to put a carpeted floor in my kitchen because I know I'm going to spill and have to clean up things like liquids, or other things that would be difficult in that type of situation. I'm not going to make wood countertops. I want something that's going to be easily cleanable and effectively cleanable as well. I've got to think about not only materials of construction, but utilities, right? I've got a kitchen. I probably want to put in, hot water for my sink to wash things. I need cold water for other things. Maybe I want filtered water to drink. I, want to have the ability to keep cold things cold. So I want to have enough capacity with my refrigerator and freezer. Do I want to have some extra things like maybe a dishwasher to make my cleaning process easier, more efficient? Storage, adequate storage. What is that space going to be used for? Maybe not just cooking, but I'm going to maybe entertain guests, right? And thinking about have enough, the flow of how people can move around and interact there. Maybe I want an island with some stools and seating for people. And so there's a lot of things to think about in the design, functionally, thinking about efficiency of the work that you're going to do, keeping things clean and looking nice, the aesthetics of things, all of that needs to come into play. And it's the same thing with our production facilities, right? We want people to be able to manage that space well, get in and out of cleaning activities as quickly as possible, right? It's like your kitchen. You get done cooking, you don't want to spend all evening cleaning up when you're done. It's the same thing in the plants. We want to get back to making product in between the different formulas or products or events, and be able to manage that space most efficiently and effectively. Sanitary design is all about thinking about the design of the space and how you're going to interact with that space to manage risk, but also be efficient.
What are some of the kind of trickier turnovers of a line? Is it from would you set up a bakery to have it be like, this is a nut only line, or do you what are some of the trickier things to overcome?
Right, exactly. So you think about what are the reasons to clean, and why would I clean? There are some tricky ones that we've got to deal with, right? Really challenging formulas from a food safety standpoint. Hey, I've got really sensitive ingredients from a micro standpoint. I'm concerned I've got raw flour, and with raw flour comes risk of some pathogens, some microorganism concerns there. I've got ingredients that might be differing allergens, so I've got to manage that. I've got concerns about managing for different consumers and their needs. Maybe I'm making a gluten-free product, so I've got to manage that. There's a lot of things from a food safety standpoint. There's quality things that I've got to deal with. Maybe I've got strong flavors or odors between different formulations, right? I might have, different breads that I'm making, and I'm like, wow, white bread is one thing, but if I've got a rosemary or I've got some type of strong odor or flavor, I've got to be able to make sure that doesn't carry over, or colors or those types of things. So those can be very challenging, especially when you think about the soils that we're dealing with. If it could be really sticky, think about in your own kitchen, right? You're like, oh, if I got to, clean up peanut butter or, baked on egg onto a frying pan. There's some things that are really difficult to clean and some that are pretty easy. Maybe it just, you got to think about, what do I have to have available to be able to remove that? Maybe I need a scraper or a stiff bristle brush, or I need the chemicals to remove that. I've got to have hot water. In other cases, dry cleaning can be adequate, right? I can just vacuum or brush materials off of a surface, and that can be adequate as well. So really understanding, what is the soil or the thing that you're trying to get off of the surface, and what's the best method to do that and get us back to making product again.
So would you say your role kind of comes in when a new facility is being designed, or is it more of a ongoing shifting of different production lines? Where do you come in?
Yeah, both. So I get involved in project execution, and I always ask, please involve us as early as possible, right? Because we want to be able to ask these very basic questions up front with our engineering teams, and as they work with contractors and we work with the equipment manufacturers, all of those types of things. We want to make sure that we're very transparent with our expectations, right? We're like, hey, we want to make sure that this system is cleanable. Here's our definition of clean. It might be very different, right? If I'm sheeting dough is a different expectation versus, and I can keep that area dry and dry clean it only versus, hey, I need to flood clean this area and clean the mixer up front of that process. So I need to be very transparent with them to, so that they can then design the equipment so it can handle wet wash down, or maybe they need to install a central vacuum system. Maybe they need to put in sloped floors and drainage to manage the water that we're going to be using for cleaning. We want to be involved as early as possible and make sure that, obviously our expectations are clear, but also that we can get in our needs as far as budgeting, right? It'll cost, we need to understand the costs involved in making the right decisions around sanitary design.
And when you go into a facility, whether it's an existing one, and I guess the question doesn't really pertain to if it's a new one or maybe the design's ready, where do you see most bakeries getting this wrong? What are some examples of things that like consistently like, oh, everybody's doing this one thing wrong or these two things wrong, and if you did it this way, then you would be more efficient?
Right. That's a great question. We unfortunately, there's a lot of waste in the process. We spend a lot of time cleaning and changing over our systems between products, and I think there's a huge opportunity to improve that because there's a disconnect in the design with the cleaning method, right? A lot of these systems were put in many, many years ago before we understood the risk involved. We know today that there's unfortunately been a greater understanding, a greater incidence of, foodborne illness, allergens, mislabels, all those types of things. And, if we could design the system such that it was conducive to the right cleaning method, and that doesn't always mean wet cleaning, right? It could be dry cleaning, right? If I can just make things more accessible to cleaning, it would go a whole lot faster. We just need to think about matching the cleaning method with the soil or the hazard that we're dealing with, and matching design with cleaning method and understanding the soil there. So Again, I think there's huge opportunities to drastically reduce the time. And I think there's an opportunity to better understand those metrics around time, right? So we have plan losses. We know that we're going to spend time cleaning between products to address, whether it's a formula change related to flavor or it's an allergen changeover. We've got to make sure that we minimize the time between those, and by employing the right design characteristics of the equipment and the facility, we can significantly reduce those. You can compare and contrast where we're at in the dairy or meat area, and they're much further along in those areas in general because of their history, right? We knew there's, a heavy regulatory presence. There was a lot of understanding of the risks around pathogens and micro risk, especially. So they obviously have to clean more often generally, but they also, the design of the equipment is much different and much more conducive to faster changeovers. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to work with our equipment manufacturers and facility design people to design out a lot of that time and make things easier for people, right? You think about going into your own kitchen, right? You never have to bring a tool to take things apart. You're right. Your blender for making smoothies or adult beverages, it just comes apart by hand, right? You unscrew the bottom, take the blade assembly apart, that little gasket that's in there, and make sure it's clean enough. Well, then you go into our plants and I have to maybe go get a whole toolbox full of tools to do those same type of jobs. So how do we work with trying to improve the design so there's less equipment or less complexity to taking things apart, especially in today's day and age when we've got so many staffing issues. And we're bringing in new people without experience and maybe the skill sets to work in these areas. How do we make things easier for them to execute these tasks and therefore save time in the whole process?
Yeah, you kind of that was going to be my next question. Would have to do with workforce and how a few questions around that. How do you impart the importance of sanitary design to a new employee? Like, what are some phrases that you might use?
Right. It's just getting people to understand the why behind sanitation, right? And it starts with understanding the risks, the hazards that we're dealing with, right? Everybody's probably got someone that they know that's had food poisoning or has allergies. Or has had some negative impact from food that they've eaten, right? So we want to talk to them about, hey, we're feeding millions, billions of people out of our production facilities. So we've got to manage these to a really high level, and we've got to understand what those hazards are and how we can minimize that risk by doing things like designing the equipment properly, executing against the cleaning methods as designed. Following good manufacturing practices, good GMPs, wearing gloves when appropriate, washing our hands, cleaning and maintaining our facilities. So, and I love it when we use in training case studies, or we use examples, and talking about, hey, I personally have had, a foodborne illness, or I've got a family member that's had a reaction to an allergic or a component of protein that wasn't intended to be in a product, and the impact to family and friends is always the most impactful when we can bring those real life stories to our team members.
And just curious, I know you've worked with a lot of different products. Is there a certain type of baked good or product that you've worked with that has been particularly problematic?
Yeah, I think the challenging part is, again, with those soils that are difficult to work with, right? So in general, in the baking industry, we're talking about a lot of low moisture, low water activity products, right? So dry type environments, or at least it ends up that way, right? We start with a mixing process and then we bake out the moisture, that type of thing. But it becomes challenging because it's a dry environment, and then we got to try to manage these hazards without water, right? So ideally, we wouldn't be introducing water in what is normally a dry environment. If I'm, introducing water, there's just so many risks that come with that. I can damage the equipment. I cause risk to my employees of dealing with hot water and the chemicals that they have to work with, and slips and trips. And then as well as all the environmental impacts of all that wastewater and treating that and utilizing so much water, that those types of things. So trying to manage that type of environment, I think, is really challenging, and especially baking items, confectionery type products that are all very low moisture, low water activity, and then trying to come up with a cleaning solution that matches with that we can also manage the risk appropriately.
So just products that need hot water to wash the equipment with.
Right. So, it's hard because you're like, okay, I've got this dry product, maybe a granola bar, for example, and it's a very dry product. But then I add, sticky components to that, right? I'm making a slurry for that, or I'm adding a chocolate drizzle, and those systems are obviously, in a lot of cases, there's not water added to the formula, right? They're low moisture, low water activity, like I've mentioned. But then how do I clean those adequately without water? So you've got to get really creative with that. Ideally, I'd have dedicated systems, and I wouldn't have to clean them as often or as rigorously and using water. But if I do, then it brings a whole level of rigor and standards when I do introduce water, and the expectations there.
So earlier you were saying that, sometimes it's you go into a place that has kind of this older equipment or, just an older setup. What's kind of the benefit drawbacks of restoration of lines versus building new?
Right, exactly. So you've got to weigh the cost, the capital versus, the ongoing cost of maintaining and cleaning those things too. So you want to do an in-depth assessment to understand, hey, what's going to be the benefit to me, to the business for replacement versus, those ongoing costs. And I don't think we have the metrics in place and the understanding in a lot of cases of how much that life cycle costs are impacting our businesses, right? They're like, because we don't track in a lot of cases really well the sanitation labor, right? And everything that goes with that, right? So it's not just the absolute cleaning we're talking about, it's the added inspection, it's the damage to the equipment that we might be seeing because of the cleaning methods and the disassembly and the chemistry that we're using, those types of things. So there can be cost to reliability and maintenance work and those types of things, and then added training for those people. So you've just got to weigh the pros and cons of managing the current assets the way they are, or buying new, or can we modify what we have, right? So there's some great ways that we can identify those hot spots or those areas of concern, and maybe make some minor modifications to those that can have dramatic improvements in the amount of time and effort it takes to clean those.
And so, this podcast is called Bake to the Future. So we want you to help us look into the future about what this field, sanitary design, might look like in maybe 5 to 10 years. What do you see down the road?
Yeah, so I think it's really taking advantage of data and analytics and understanding how much waste we have currently, right, and how much opportunity there is by making those improvements. I mean, it's not unheard of for a large percentage of our available time on these production lines to be spent cleaning, and I think there's a huge opportunity given a better understanding of the amount of time and labor that's being spent on that to say, hey, if we get the right people together, the right cross-functional team, including equipment manufacturers and our own internal food safety teams and engineering, to say, hey, let's figure out a better way to design this. But we've got to, like I said, start out with those metrics. So one area that I'd like to see is just understanding time better, and time meaning labor minutes per unit operation. So how much time does it take me to dismantle, clean, inspect, reassemble a piece of equipment? And if today a piece of equipment takes, let's say 8 hours to clean, how can I push back with industry support to say, hey, how do I get that down to 2 hours, 1 hour? What is it going to take to minimize the amount of tools, to minimize the complexity from a geometry standpoint? How do I come up with unique cleaning methods or tools to get after that? So I think there's a huge opportunity to reduce that waste in time that we've got by focusing on proper design.
And so it sounds like we have a little show coming up in about a year from now called IBIE, the Baking Expo in Las Vegas. It sounds like bakers should bring their sanitation folks to that show too, because like those folks would see equipment in a much different way, right?
Absolutely. And then they can work with, again, their cross-functional team. That's why everybody's got to show up to these type of events and review the situation as a whole, right? Because it's not only from a food safety standpoint, I want my health and human safety people. They're looking at it from that standpoint too. Sometimes we clash because we want to get access to equipment. They want to keep us away from that equipment, right? And trying to keep our people safe. So it's a balance there. But having our, the engineering and maintenance teams look at those and just get different eyes on that, so we can all come to an agreement on what are all the goals and end state that we want to end up with. And ultimately, we all want it to be making product more often than being down and being maintained or cleaned.
Yeah, I feel like the common thread of everything you've been saying to me has been efficiency. And I feel like that is like the key word that you're trying to aim for, is efficiency with making sure everything is running as smoothly as possible.
I was just going to say, absolutely. I use a new term, KISS, right? So keep it simple for sanitation. If we can minimize time, not only will that benefit us, obviously, from a financial standpoint, but I truly believe that's going to minimize our food safety risk. If I can simplify things, again, like we talked about the staffing issues, if I can make things simpler for a new employee or temporary or seasonal staffing to come in and execute, there's a lot less risk to my end consumer for, a mistake, right, that led to a micro issue or an allergen contamination, those types of things. So it benefits everyone if we can all focus around minimizing time and minimizing complexity in our sanitation processes.
And as we know, in the baking industry, there's no such thing as competition when it comes to food safety. So I think that's an excellent point to end on. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the conversation that we haven't talked about already?
No, I just appreciate the conversation, and it's an exciting time when, sanitation and food safety is at such a forefront. So we got to take advantage of this time and really use this opportunity to improve not only food safety, but really drive efficiencies and help the business move forward.
And kind of linking back to our AI episode, Haley, bringing some artificial intelligence in there to find some opportunities there where AI and sanitation can meet might also be something to think about in the future.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a big fan of taking advantage of those new technologies to understand and communicate our opportunities with our employees better.
And before we wrap up, I did do a little bit of Googling. I was paying attention, but I was Googling a little bit, what is a Bismarck and versus a jelly donut and all of this. So it turns out that it is a geographical thing. So in Germany, these jelly-filled donuts are called Berliners. Sometime in the let's see, when did it happen? The Bismarck is named after Otto von Bismarck. By the end of the 18th century is when that happened. And due to the large number of Central European immigrants, which is where Otto von Bismarck was, a lot of people in the upper Midwest, such as Minnesota, call it Bismarck because that's the name that they knew it from the old country. So, ta-da, we learned something new today.
Awesome. Well, with that, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking with us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
And I want to let our listeners know that they can let us know what they thought of the show by emailing hello@americanbakers.org or leave us a voicemail at baketothefuture.org. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it's Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, or Ghana.
Bake to the Future is brought to you by the American Bakers Association in partnership with Human Factor. To hear upcoming and past episodes, go to baketothefuture.org. Bake to the Future is produced by Haley Blumenreich. Audio engineer is Blake Alton. And A Slice of the Action is written by the American Bakers Association's Government Relations team.